This episode of Author Stories is brought to you by the Writing Mastery Academy. Founded by Jessica Brody, author of the best-selling plotting guide, Save the Cat Writes a Novel. The Writing Mastery Academy features online, on-demand writing courses, including the official Save the Cat Writes a Novel companion course, novel fast drafting, crafting dynamic characters, and productivity hacks for writers, to name just a few, plus monthly live webinars on various writing topics. Go to jessicabrody.com/Hank to learn more and get your first month of unlimited access to all the content for just $6. That's right, just $6. jessicabrody.com/Hank. You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Blind, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest on the show is Jane Healey. She has a brand new book that is available everywhere today. It is called The Secret Stealers. We had a little rough weather as the show recording started, so we didn't get the first couple of minutes. But I was just introducing her, and I asked her the question, about how this last pandemic year has affected her as a writer. So join me in progress as I talk to Jane Healey, author of The Secret Stealers.
On March 1st of last year. So in hindsight, I'm so grateful, because the hardest part for me of the whole writing process is getting that first draft down on paper. And so the past year has really been the various stages of the editorial process. And, it's been great in some ways to have this project to throw myself into during a pandemic, but it's also been challenging because my husband has not been back to the office. My daughters, today was their very first day back at school, like full time in the
Wow.
They've been hybrid, but the whole school's back today, which is amazing, but it's been challenging trying to work from home, and it's not like I could go to a coffee shop like I normally would, or a library. So yeah, challenging for sure, but I was, I have a wonderful editorial team, and we got it done.
So as a person who writes historical fiction, most of it based in times where, the world is in chaos, and, hard times and hardships are met by everyone. Did you get this feeling, during the last year, like, oh my gosh, I'm living in one of my books?
I've thought a lot about the historical context of the past year, because I have teenage daughters, and I think about like what that generation, they're 14 and 17, what they're going to be thinking about 10 or 20 years from now about this time, and and the writing that's going to come out of this time period, and all of those things. I think one of the things that people are gravitating towards historical fiction right now is because there's a lot of stories of people going through really hard times in history and coming out the other side okay. And I think that's really a positive thing when you're going through history yourself.
Yeah. For folks who might not have heard the last episode that we did, and I'll put a link to it in the show notes where people can go back and listen. But when did you realize that you wanted to be a novelist, that this was something that you had to pursue?
Quite honestly, very, very young. This is maybe third grade. I've always wanted to write novels, but it just took me a little while to get here. I took a long, meandering road, like many authors do. I was a pragmatic high schooler and college student, so I ended up in high tech because it would pay off my student loans. And in the back of my mind, though, it was always like, well, someday I'm going to write fiction. Someday I'm going to write these books. And it was really when my daughters were born and I started freelance writing, because I needed I was lucky enough to work from home, more flexible job with them, that I was, I think having kids, it just makes you like question, well, now or never, Jane, when are you going to do this? So that's when I really started taking it seriously. And then my first novel, The Saturday Evening Girls Club, was published in 2017.
What is it about historical fiction that draws you so?
I love research. I also really look at the history as a jumping off point for the story, for the narrative. And there's so many little undiscovered stories in history, in whether it's World War II or any other time, that I think that we're still learning about. So that's really what draws me to it. I love the research, and I love using those true stories as a jumping off point for a fictional version of the events.
Your last two books, specifically the new book and Beantown Girls, were based in early to mid 20th century. What is it about this particular time period that it captures your imagination? We've had an abundance of great World War II, especially historical fiction that's come out the last couple of years, and I catch myself wondering, like, why are these stories so important right now, and why do you think writers are focusing on this time period? Is it because we are getting just far enough away from this event that we still have, or at least we had, a handful of people still alive from this period that are just gradually dying off, and we're losing some of the personal stories from then?
I think you hit the nail on the head, quite honestly. I think, for me, my grandfather I was very close with, he passed away several years ago, but he was a firefighter on the Navy ships in World War II off the coast of Africa and Europe. And that is why, personally, it's always been a period of time in history that's been fascinating. But I think that as collectively, people feel like we're losing that generation now. And I think that's part of the interest in it. And I think that's part of the reason why so many people are writing about it. I know, like with the Beantown Girls, there are at least two of the original World War II Red Cross Clubmobile girls still alive, but they're 100 years old. So there's just not that many of that generation left. And I think it's to honor their memories and their stories and preserve them and celebrate them.
What is it about this time period that makes us look back, obviously at the horror of what was going on, but makes us look back so fondly on the people that we meet during this time period? What made them special?
I think, that people talk probably a little too much about the greatest generation, but I think that, it was a very clear good versus evil in World War II. So I think there's that aspect of it. And there's a lot of stories of that generation of people, ordinary people in extraordinary times, who really rose to the occasion and became heroes. You hear about them all the time. They're still especially some of the stories of the women, they're more undiscovered and just coming to light. But I think that's what it is. It was a time period where everyone had to kind of step up, whether they were on the home front or they were fighting abroad in some way.
Yeah, and we all can draw some sort of connection to this time period and to the people, even if it's tenuous at best. It kind of reminds us of who we are in a way.
Yes, exactly, and the best version of ourselves. I think.
Yeah.
I think that those people really represent the best version of Americans, of the Allies. Absolutely.
So when you released the Beantown Girls, when you finished that project and you were out promoting it and getting to talk to people back when we could talk to people and do book tours and stuff like that, what was the reception that you got around that book? We talked just as the book was coming out, but when it had been out for a few weeks, a few months, what was the feedback you were getting from people?
It was really, exceeded my expectations in every way, and it's still exceeding my expectations 2 years out. It's really been incredible. And it was, it hit the Washington Post bestseller list and the Amazon charts bestsellers. And I'm still probably doing a few book clubs or organizations a month virtually where I present the history behind the story of that novel. And I'm still getting letters about that novel and people sharing their own personal stories. So it's been incredible in the best possible way. It's been so, so great.
So when you finish a project like that, and it has, if you listen back to the prior interview that we did, there was, so much of a personal connection there to that story, and it really felt like a labor of love in a lot of ways. I think I got from you, and it was also your second book, your sophomore effort, and there's a lot of pressure that comes with that second book that comes out.
Yes.
When you then go to move on to The Secret Stealers, when did the idea for this book come to you, and what were some of the historical nuggets that you learned about that kind of started this fire inside you?
So that's a great question. I keep a running file of possible story ideas. So I actually found, when I was working on the Beantown Girls, I came across this article about this woman. Her name was Stephanie Check Rader, and towards the end of the war in World War II, she was working in Poland, presumably as a member of the embassy staff, but in reality, she was working for the Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA, as a spy, stealing intelligence from the Russians at the time. It was it was like 45, 46. And I didn't, so that was the first article I came across that I was like, well, that's really interesting. I knew about, the British SOE, which was kind of the counterpart to the CIA, the OSS, and they had female spies in World War II, but I didn't know that there were any American women over there. And so then I came across another article that I also filed away, and it was about these two old ladies in a retirement home. They were in their late 80s, and they were in a retirement home community outside of DC, and they lived on the same street, and they found out that they had both served overseas as spies with the OSS during the war, and they never had met each other because one was in Asia and one was in Europe. So that, and they talked about how even in their late 80s, they had a hard time sharing those stories because they were, they were spies. They were supposed to not share anything with anyone, even their families. So that was really intriguing. And that kind of, between those two articles, that kind of sent me down the path, because I was like, who are these women? And what an extraordinary choice to make in the 40s to become a spy overseas for the American, for the OSS. And then I just, went down the research rabbit hole and was completely fascinated.
So in the book, we meet Anna Cavanaugh, and she comes from a background that you wouldn't think of as spy. How did this character come to you? How did you create her?
Yes, Anna is really a composite of the different women that I read about that worked for the OSS, that went overseas for the OSS. The OSS was founded by General William Donovan. He was a friend of Roosevelt's from law school, and he had to build this organization from scratch very quickly. And he was, upper class from New York and Ivy League guy. So he pulled from his own network of associates, whether work associates, alumni from Columbia. And so the organization earned the nickname Oh So Snobby or Oh So Social, because a lot of the people that ended up working there were Ivy League grads, upper class, upper middle class. And so that is why Anna has more of a upper class background, because that's the type of people they recruited very quickly. And that's the type, a lot of those women kind of fit that profile.
So, how accessible was information about the OSS when you started digging into this? Like, how much stuff is there out there to dig into and to understand the inner workings?
Well, now there's several books about it. There's some online resources. The personnel files were only declassified in 2008, but those are available now online. And one of the things that is interesting that is still classified is the number of women who served overseas as undercover spies. I don't think it's a large number from the U.S. I think it's somewhere between 38 and a couple hundred. I say 38 because 38 women were trained at OSS parachute training school, and if you went to parachute school, you were going undercover. So it's been interesting, but I was able to find quite a bit. Particularly, there's a couple of books about General Donovan because he was such an extraordinary character, the founder of the OSS, and Elizabeth McIntosh, one of the elderly ladies in the article I mentioned. She wrote a book called Sisterhood of Spies about the women of the OSS that was really a memoir about her life experience in the OSS, but also she interviewed several of the other women about their experiences. So that book was really a jumping off point for me to get into the story.
Are you looking for software that helps you bring your novel to life? Novelize is a web-based writing app which allows you to access your work on any device with a browser and an internet connection, right from your desktop, laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Just get the novel written. Say goodbye to sticky notes. With our notebook on the side, you can keep track of all the important information you need to write your novel. We keep distractions to a minimum, help you track your progress, and encourage you to write more novels. You can even use the same notebook for your novels in a series. Outline, write, or organize your novel by switching between modes. You can write your outline notes while you're writing, and you can move scenes and chapters around anytime in the organize mode. Choose between the dark and light theme to help prevent eye strain so that you can stay immersed in your book. Novelize, the app for writers by writers. So when you have this idea and you find this, fascinating piece of history, how much research goes into before you can actually start writing the characters and a story forms? Like what is the research and the pre-writing process like?
For me, it's so much research. It was a lot. This one was, I say like the Beantown Girls was about the Red Cross Clubmobile Girl program in World War II, and there's only a finite amount of resources in terms of research you can find about that program because it was pretty small. But this story is about the OSS. I pull in some stories about the women of the SOE. I pull in many stories about the French Resistance, including one woman in particular, Jeanne Rousseau. And so, I could still be researching now. It's just a massive amount of research out there. And so, but for me, again, the research is the jumping off point. My outline is in some ways like a super messy first draft because it helps me organize my research, and I outline chapter by chapter, scene by scene, event by event in the scene. So by the time I've outlined it all out, it helps me keep track of what research I need where, and I have a beginning and a middle and an end to the story.
So this is something that just truly fascinates me about historical fiction, is that you are working within the confines of historical events, things that actually happened, and then you're telling us stories about people that are fully believable in this series of events or in this time period, while taking the liberty to create characters who may or may not have done, this or that, but within the confines of things that actually happened. When you sit and just think about kind of the weight of what you're doing, is that ever just like crippling,
daunting?
Think,
oh, absolutely.
Daunting, just
yes. Well, it is because I talk to my historical fiction author friends about this all the time. You're maniacal about the research and getting the details right, and getting particularly the kind of macro historical events that happen in the novel, the dates and times. All those details, you want to get them right. And so what I kind of, especially this book has some characters that were real life. General Donovan is in the novel, and some of them are fictional. And one of the questions I always ask myself as I'm writing is, if it did not happen, if this event or did not happen. Could it have happened within the context of the time and place in history? Does it feel authentic to that time and place and what was going on in terms of historical events? That's kind of one of my kind of questions I'm constantly asking as I write. Like, is this feasible? Does it feel organic, authentic, or are readers going to be like, I don't buy it? So that's, yeah, but it is, it's daunting. And if you think about it sometimes too much, you can be paralyzed. So you're just going to plow right through.
The Secret Stealers has some really great characters in the book. You meet some awesome people along the way. Do you start thinking about characters that will populate the story and that Anna will interact with throughout her story from the beginning? Like, what is the casting process like for you when you start thinking of the characters that will inhabit your story?
Yeah, I'm thinking about that from the very start, because I think that, people fall in love with characters, and that doesn't mean every character has to be likable, but you have to be willing to want to follow along on their journey, not just the main character, but all the other characters in the novel. So I think a great deal about that from the very start. And this one, I do a lot of kind of thoughts and character sheets and different things like that to get a feel for who they are. But this one, some of them kind of evolved as I wrote. For instance, Tatiana, who's one of Anna's friends in the SOE, I didn't really expect her to have such a large role in the novel, and then it just felt right and made sense. And I love her as a character because she's really sassy, and she was like a baguette girl working in Paris, and all of a sudden becomes a spy instead, and it turns out she was born for the role. So, and I had read about women like that, and I thought that was really interesting.
France during this time period was a really interesting place, kind of being on the front lines of what was happening while being separated in a way. What did this setting offer you, as a storyteller?
I think that it was so important, and I really felt like particularly Occupied Paris was like another character in the book in a way. And I actually in October 2019, right before everything kind of shut down, and I went to Paris for a week with my husband. I suffered through a research trip to Paris, and I found this historian. His name is Nigel Perrin. He's a professor and a historian and writer, and one of his specialties is Occupied Paris and the French Resistance. And I spent an entire day with him, walking all over the city, taking notes, taking pictures, because he was just incredible resource in terms of knowledge about the places and where the French Resistance lived and worked, and all these different stories. And he really helped me. I'll tell you, like, that trip was amazing because it's Paris anyway, but was incredibly valuable and really changed the narrative arc of the story particularly because of Nigel, but also just because of my research there.
Speaking of that, being in America, there's a lot of the country has a very recent history, and by that I mean there are a lot of cities in America that are 100 years old or less. I know Boston is different. There's several hundred years of history there. Some places in the Deep South where I live have several hundred years of history. But it's not that case with our country as a whole. When you go to a place like Paris and start doing research, does it feel different there? But because they do have almost a very ancient history, where this time period was only one piece of that very ancient history.
Yes, I think that absolutely. I feel like anytime I go to Europe, it's humbling in terms, like, their depth of history is just humbling to me and fascinating. And you look at buildings and structures and museums, and you think it just blows my mind, because they have, like you said, they go back to ancient times. We go back to 1776. So it's
Right.
very different. It's a very different feeling. And it's one of the reasons I love going to Europe, is because the history is so rich.
Absolutely. So now that The Secret Stealers is out, and well, first off, it was released as an Amazon First Reads, about a month or so, and offered to a huge chunk of the reading community, in Prime members. What do you think about the reception that you've got from the book so far?
It's been really, really wonderful. Knock on wood. I'm just so grateful. I try after a certain point not to read reviews, but of course, when a book first comes out, you can't help yourself. And people seem to really be responding to it, to really be loving the story and the characters, like we talked about. And it's, as a writer, it's the most validating thing. It's everything to see readers respond in a positive way to your work.
Well, we're sitting here at launch, and there are, right at 3,000 reviews, with a 4.6, I think, average. That's exceptional for a launch day. That's a gift to a writer, really.
Oh, it's such a gift. I do not take any of it for granted. Being chosen by the editors as an Amazon First Reads was amazing, and I give my editor Alicia Clancy all the credit in the world for that. She's such a great advocate and just a wonderful, like the best kind of editor to have.
Absolutely. So now that this book is out, to the world, once it's released, there's nothing more you can do. The book is the book, and it takes on a life of its own. But what are you turning your attention to now?
I think the best thing, and I'm not always good at it, is to start working on another thing. So you don't become obsessed with like ratings and sales. And, I think throwing yourself into another project is the best thing you can do. So I'm going down a couple different research paths right now. I'm not sure where they're going to take me. But I'm excited about it. It's a good distraction from the, first month of launch.
Yeah. Will this be along the same time period, do you think?
I don't know, because like you said, I have a couple different thoughts, and I'm superstitious, so I'm not going to share just yet. But I know that there's been a enormous amount of interest and writing in World War II. There's a lot of historical fiction, World War II historical fiction out there right now. So I'm looking at some other time periods as well, but I do still have a fascination with that era, and thankfully it seems like other people do too. So we'll see.
Great. I can't wait to see what comes next. The new book, The Secret Stealers, is out, available everywhere now. Whenever you're hearing this, you can grab it in Kindle edition or paperback or audiobook, however you like to read books. It's available in the format that you love. There's links to it in the show notes of this episode. Jane, if people are just discovering you and want to dig into all the great stuff that you do, where can they connect with you online?
For better or for worse, I'm on all social media, pretty much, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. But I think the best way to find out what I have coming up is through my website, janehealey.com, Healey. And I do have a number of webinars coming up, one tonight with some of my author friends to sort of kick off launch. And then I have some webinars discussing the history behind the story of the Secret Stealers, and that information and the sign-up information on Zoom is all available on my website.
Excellent. We'll put a link there for folks in the show notes for folks to find where they can connect with you in all those ways. The new book, The Secret Stealers, is out everywhere. Go grab a copy of it today. Jane, thank you so much for taking time to come back on the show.
Hank, this was awesome. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it.
Authors, if you're looking for a partner to help ensure that your book is the best it can possibly be, look no further than Pico's House. Crystal and her staff make a conscious effort to be critical yet courteous. They also strive to make the business side of things run smoothly so that you can rest easy knowing that your manuscript is in capable hands. Whether you need beta reading, developmental editing, a manuscript critique, line editing, copy editing, or proofreading, Pico's House is the one-stop shop for you. Check them out today at picoshouse.com to get started.
Authors, I have a fantastic new service to tell you about. It's called PubSite. PubSite is a service to help you build your very own website your home on the web where you can promote your work and give your fans a place to connect with you. PubSite is a website platform that allows every author, regardless of budget, to have a great-looking professional website. Developed by the book marketing professionals at FSB Associates, PubSite is the new, easy-to-use DIY website builder developed specifically for books and authors. Whether you're an author of one book or 20, or a small publisher, PubSite allows you to build, design, and most importantly, update your website pain-free. No need to be dependent on a designer or webmaster to make a small but costly change to your website. Save the money and do it yourself. PubSite is the best platform for authors because it's a book-centric platform. PubSite was built just for authors and small publishers. Every design, feature, and layout is book-centric. They have customized designs for you to use. It's easy to build. No coding or HTML is necessary to create a stunning, professional-looking website with all the features you want. Get a custom domain name, yourname.com. It's simple to update. You can add all of your books, add a blog and a book tour, sell from any retailer, manage your email list and social media, and even do e-commerce. Build your website with a 14-day free trial, then pay just $19.99 per month, which includes hosting, and we offer packages starting at $499 to set up the website for you. Pub-site.com, the place to help authors find their home on the web.